Pacers make a move. Cole Swider has been signed by the Pacers on a one-year deal. Why'd they do this? What does Swider add to this team and what it means for the back end of the Pacers roster? Plus, day one of a two-day mailbag coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI. And today, first of all, congratulations to Tyrese, Haliburton, and Andrew Nembhard for winning their groups. They have good quarterfinal draws. Could be a lot of Olympic talk this week. And second of all, we're talking about the Pacers making a signing, Cole Swider, to the Pacers, first reported by Chomstrania. I have a story up on it as well. What does this mean? Cole Swider, 2 years of NBA experience, can really shoot it. How does this impact the Pacers roster? Could he actually make the team? What kind of deal is this? What does this mean for Kendall Brown, Enrique Freeman, all those fellas? Then we start a mailbag. Two-parter here. I got all the questions sorted out. We'll do a little under half of them today and all the rest tomorrow to get this week going. And then I have some fun guests lined up for the rest of this week. Could be the first player interview this week, maybe next week. We'll see. My rule is no one on the current roster, unless they're a new rookie. Then sometimes I'll do that. Let's trudge on here. Cole Swider to the Pacers, as we learned over the weekend. In fact, we learned this on Saturday, pretty early in the morning. If you don't know who Cole Swider is, played at Villanova and Syracuse. His rookie season was with the Lakers, last season with the Miami Heat, both years on two-way deals. He's 25. He turned 25 in May and just played in Summer League for the Heat. And I can pitch you Cole Swider very easily. And I can pitch you Cole Swider by telling you about something that I thought the Pacers needed after they made their first kind of wave of signings. Siakam in and Toppin in before Wiseman. I said, I still think they kind of need some shooting. And they have enough, but the way this team plays, the guys they like to trust, shooting is very valuable, and obviously being a good shooter is better than not. That is the entire Cole Swider pitch. It's very easy to explain why a team would want him. He can really shoot it, right? And his NBA stats do actually a pretty poor job to me of doing that justice. 37.5% his first season with the Lakers, and then 10 for 30 last year with the Heat, 33.3%. But hasn't missed a free throw in the pros. I can easily sell it to you with his G League stats or Summer League stats, or basically any other meaningful sample of three-point shots for him. Last year, across his two G League seasons, he's hit 193 of his 429 three-point attempts. That's 44.9% on very good volume. Summer League with the Heat earlier this month, they won the Summer League championship. 45.9% from three there. Right? 34% in the NBA is not that good, but all of his resume is like, yo, this dude can really shoot it. Like, it's very obvious why two different teams have wanted to sign him. It's because he can really shoot. The rest of his game, certainly some work to be done, right? In college, it was similar. He shot over 40% the last two seasons from deep, but under 50% inside the arc his last season. For example, when he finally upped the volume at Syracuse on twos, right? Decent rebounder there, but the passing's never really been a thing for him. In fact, in college, two of his 4 seasons, he had more turnovers than assists, and it was exactly even his senior year. And then last year in the NBA, he had more turnovers than assists, right? So not a great passer. He's tall, so he's okay on the glass. Team defense is fine, but not good enough. That stuff is less important. What is important is he can shoot it so well that NBA teams still value him despite only having 25 games of experience in the NBA. So that's the Cole Swider pitch and why the Pacers have pursued him. This got reported as, and this is what I heard as well, is that it's a 1-year non-guaranteed minimum contract. Now that hits me, bam, and I always think, oh, Exhibit 10, right? For those of you who don't know, we'll go quick on this. An Exhibit 10 deal means if you get waived before the season and then join the team's G League affiliate, you can get a bonus, right? And Cole Swider is two-way eligible, which matters because Exhibit 10s can be converted to two ways. So here's the thing. The Pacers don't have his G League rights, so I don't know if it can even be an Exhibit 10 unless the Mad Ants trade for his G League rights. Then it could be. So at the moment, I'm not going to assume anything unless the Mad Ants make a trade. Maybe because he's been on two ways, no one has his G League rights. Doesn't really matter that much. What does matter is this is interesting in that he's kind of good. He's an NBA experienced player who's played well at many stops and shot the ball well from three and is now coming to the Pacers. So there's a couple ways you can do this. If it's just straight an Exhibit 10, you can probably view this as maybe he's competing for a two-way or a roster spot. If it's not an Exhibit 10, then he's almost certainly competing for a roster spot with Kendall Brown, right? That last spot that everybody views as open. Wiseman's the third big. They gave him guaranteed money. James Johnson's the vet. They gave him some guaranteed money. Kendall Brown has no guaranteed money and did not play well in Summer League. So this, to me, signals potential competition for the 15th spot, whether it could be Cole Swider, who very slightly, like insignificantly, but not nothing, is a cheaper contract than Kendall Brown this season. And again, Swider can really shoot it. He's much older to stretch. He's 25, Brown's 21, right? That matters. But Swider has done more in his NBA minutes. And it's very few games for both of them. But there is potentially, they play similar positions. They are the same height, but they have vastly different skill sets. Could not be more opposite players. Potentially created an opportunity to have competition for the final roster spot, as if there already wasn't some, right? My theory, I wrote about this Sunday, and I talked about this when the Pacers signed their two-way contract players, is that the reason Enrique Freeman is not signed yet by the Pacers is that he is in consideration. I don't know this. This is just a guess for the final roster spot because they signed Quentin Jackson. They signed Tristan Newton. If they knew who their two-way guys would be, they could have just done all three. So the fact they didn't sign Freeman to me made me think, I wonder if they're wondering if he will get the final roster spot instead of Brown instead of a two-way. Or if they could just sign him to a two-way now. Now, in theory, they could bring him into camp and say you can compete for the roster spot or just get a two-way, but dynamics can change. What if Swider and Brown are unbelievable in camp? What if Oscar Tshiebwe's in camp and he looks unbelievable, right? So if you're Enrique Freeman, you'd like to sign one or the other right now, like a 1 year minimum that's guaranteed or a two-way or whatever. So to me, if this is not an Exhibit 10 for Cole Swider, and it's just a straight 1 year non-guaranteed minimum, and he's competing for the last roster spot with Kendall Brown, that probably spells a two-way contract for Enrique Freeman. If it is an Exhibit 10 contract for Cole Swider, he could be competing for a two-way or the last roster spot, and then Freeman could be in the mix for that last roster spot, and Swider could slide in to that open slot from Tshiebwe that exists. So what the Swider signing does is two things. One is it gives them a potential shooter to develop in their system. And Rick Carlisle trusts shooters and likes shooters. And if he puts you on the floor, he's going to let you shoot. If he trusts you to do it, go for it. Take the shots if you're open. Well, we've seen it from Swider in the pros with the Heat and with the Lakers. I can't remember exactly how many points it was. He had a huge game where he went like semi-viral. He had a huge shot for the Lakers a few years ago, and he had a 14-point game at his absolute peak for Miami last season, and the Miami development system machine. He had 11 points against the Nets, and then his 14-point game came later in the season against the Pelicans, where he made 4 threes, right? Again, the pitch is very obvious for what he could be. So that is what this spells to me. Depending on what this comes in as when it's official, whether that's an Exhibit 10, watch out for Mad Ants transactions there, but whether that's an Exhibit 10 or whether it's just a standard deal, how this comes in will kind of influence how I think about what the Pacers still have to do. So if it is an Exhibit 10, probably good news for Enrique Freeman and his chances of potentially getting a standard roster spot. If it's not an Exhibit 10, I would guess that Enrique Freeman maybe is getting a two-way and they're trying to have competition for their last roster spot with a forward. That is all just guessing and reading the tea leaves of what has happened and what decisions have to be made for the Pacers, but it makes sense. They just signed a shooter that can play on the wing. You can do worse with your 15th roster spot than that, especially on a non-guaranteed contract. Swider already tweeted about it, quote tweeting Shams' tweet. That is all the confirmation you need that this is happening, even though it's not official yet. So there you go. 1 week after I say, hey, I don't have to talk about transactions anymore until something actually happens. Something actually happened. And the very first segment of that show was talking about, hey, the Pacers can still sign somebody. They just did with Cole Swider. So if we have 15 players we've seen sign deals with the Pacers, so that's a full roster, plus Swider, that's 16, plus the two-ways, that's 18. Enrique Freeman makes 19. 2 open availabilities for the Pacers heading into camp right now. If they want to bring more than 19, We've heard about Kisei Tominaga. We've heard about Josiah Jordan James. They could be in camp. They could not be. And anyone else that agrees to an Exhibit 10 could be there too. And of course, Oscar Tshiebwe could be in the mix. So there's still some stuff to sort out. Let's answer some questions. It's mailbag time. The Pacers, if you have any more questions about that signing, hit me up on Twitter at Tony R. East. Now, though, I'm going to answer your questions about the Pacers from Twitter. Everybody, we have to talk quickly about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whatever you need, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay's guaranteed fit, you're burning rubber, not cash. Because with eBay Motors, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back because they have eBay's guaranteed fit. And with all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On NBA. Why? Because I hosted it. It's me and three of our other Locked On hosts as we talk about what's the plan for three Eastern Conference teams. We talk Knicks, we talk Nets, we talk Bulls. As we figure out what's going on there. Even though it might seem obvious, if you listen, you'll see why we get into the weeds with all three of those teams. Let's get into mailbag mode. If you've been listening to Locked On Pacers for years, you know that once the first full week of August comes, I like to do a mailbag, hear what people want me to talk about, as well as potentially get some topic ideas for later in the summer. We'll see. And it's just fun to interact with what people have to say. So we start with, I'll just go in the order they were asked. These were all responses to a tweet on the Locked On Pacers account. And by order they were asked, I mean the order I screenshotted them. Christopher Waltermeyer. I believe, Chris, you've commented on the YouTube page before. You have your own YouTube channel. I checked it out. It says, will Ben M., so Bennedict Mathurin, take a leap defensively this year? Enough a leap to take Nesmith's starting job? I believe so, is what he said. He said he believes so. I don't know that. Nesmith, the value he has on the perimeter, and especially on the defensive end, is in particular his ability to guard someone in particular. And I mean that specifically to not say team defense. He's a very good on-ball pest. The big adjustment in that Knicks series, right? Putting him on Jalen Brunson. Just a tiny bit of size was so important, not because anyone stopped Brunson at all. No one did the whole playoffs, but because what that did is the ripple effect of just like the small amount of time it took him to make a harder pass because there was more length on him, made it so the defense could rotate better, and it just worked. It just worked. And he guards good players all the time. Now, he does have a height disadvantage sometimes at the three, but he's the same height generally as Mathurin. There's not a ton of change there. So I think Nesmith's a better defender than Mathurin, but the question is, would he grow into that? And the reason I bring up on-ball defense again is Mathurin is better at that than team defense, right? He was very proud of himself last year in camp when they were talking about they did this one-on-one drill so they could get better at guarding their yard, as they call it, keeping guys out of the paint and guarding. And he talked about doing well in those tournaments, right? And Mathurin is, especially when he's engaged, a pretty good and pesty on-ball defender. Most notable play he's ever made was that defensive stop on Giannis against the Bucks last year, but is good at that stuff. The separator is team defense. Mathurin, off-ball defensively, not sharp enough at all. I think he would even admit that. He has admitted that, certainly, that his on-ball defense is better than his team defense. And so for him to take Nesmith's spot, he would have to become an awesome defender, because that's not really the separator to me. The reason that I think Nesmith is starting over Mathurin or whoever is starting over Mathurin is Nesmith can really shoot it too. He's a really good off-ball offensive player, right? And he improved a little bit as like catch, shot, fake, dribble guy this year. But the fact that he can defend the way that I described and make threes at a pretty good level, right? Was leading the league in three-point percentage for a hot second last season. That is what makes him so valuable and such a good fit, is he doesn't require the ball playing with Haliburton, and Mathurin does require the ball. So that fit is a little clunkier, and Mathurin right now, this could change as well, is not the off-ball shooter that Nesmith is. So I think it's twofold. If Mathurin's going to start in Nesmith's place, yes, defensive improvement, taking a leap, whatever, could be part of it, right? If he is always in the right positions and he's making defensive plays by jumping the lanes or shutting down 2 men at once, that'd be huge because I already think Ben Mathurin can be a talented on-ball defender. But that would have to happen, and he would have to improve as an off-ball offensive player for me to think that he could take Nesmith's starting spot, not because of general talent or anything like that. They have just different skill sets in general, but because of fit with the starting five. And in fact, I think a lot of people who are very pro Mathurin, and remember last year I did a whole show at the end of July about why I was really high on him, and a lot of the stuff that made that the case didn't necessarily happen in year two, but there are reasons to be very high on Ben Mathurin. I think that the difference between the spectrum of Mathurin discussion is not about his talent, it's about his fit. And he is probably better deployed with just one of Haliburton or Siakam so he can have the ball and be Ben Mathurin and push and probe and get into the lane. And of course, the passing and shooting has to improve. But if his skill set does not improve in other ways, that's the best way to use him. If he becomes a great off-ball shooter or an awesome ball mover, then yes, he could fit in with those two guys, and his defense is pretty good. So I think that question's twofold in that if he takes a defensive leap this year, that'd be great. Would it be enough to take Nesmith's job? I think would have to also include an offensive growth too. Not necessarily like big improvements, just like tweaks to what his focuses are internal lines. That's a good question. And I think Mathurin's defense will be a big part of his game this year. Because everybody talks about like him being like, everybody keeps saying, oh, if Mathurin takes this giant step offensively and he's a star, like the Pacers are set up so well. I think that, I guess that's true. But to me, if he's really good defensively, that's huge for the Pacers. He can be a two-way player, even at his just right now level of offense. That's a great player. And something the Pacers could certainly use because they have a good perimeter defender all the time on the floor. Good question. Number two that I screenshotted. Everybody that replied, I screenshotted, but this is just the order it happened in. Says, do you think Myles Turner ends up being extended even if it's 28 to 30 million per year? And if he does, how many years do you think the deal is? So first of all, needless point of clarity, he can't have a contract extension, air quotes, because he renegotiated his contract, and you can't extend those for 3 years. And that date will not happen. It will not come that 3-year deadline. So he will hit free agency next year. But in terms of extending his contract in free agency as a signing, I mean, I said when I did the Alex Riley segment last Friday, like 3 for 80, 3 for 85, 3 for 90, like that is a range that makes sense to me, given what the center market has kind of formed to be with Hartenstein, with Brook Lopez, with Nick Claxton, with Porzingis, and just now with Jared Allen. And the cap's going to go up next year. So where does that sit for Myles Turner? So there's leverage for both sides. Myles Turner can point to the market and point to the cap growth and say, I want that plus that. And he can say, you have no way to replace me. And he's right. If he leaves, the Pacers do not have a good method to get a center of his quality, right? But the Pacers can say, hey, the luxury tax or whatever barrier they may have if they add talent this season is preventing us from offering you that. Can we find a middle ground if you want to stay? So I think there is room for negotiation because of that. As you guys have heard me talk about many a time, it's going to be tight fitting in the Pacers salaries next year just because of how much they've done this summer in terms of signing players. But assuming they do what I expect and keep Mathurin's option around and keep a lot of their players that make sense to keep into next season, including Furphy. They already have $154.8 million in salaries committed for next year, give or take a little bit, which is $33 million from the tax line. And so if Turner takes up 27 to 30 million of that, that's great. But that also would put them at a team of, 9, 10 guys and that close to the tax. And that doesn't include their first round pick. And that doesn't include many other things. So it's just a really interesting kind of tightrope game. So I think that they'd probably be willing to pay Myles Turner close to his market value. But I think they'd have to say, if you help us a tiny bit, it would make it way easier to finish constructing this team. But if he gets that much money, TJ McConnell, probably not back. Isaiah Jackson, tough to imagine him fitting into that spot. So it's just a really tricky proposition for all that to happen. And it might require a different move to clear some salary. It might require some other painful thing. But I think they should, if they have this current situation they look like they're going to be in as of right now, I think that 28-ish million per year would be a fair compromise for this, right? That would be close to 3 for 84 if I can do math fast enough. And I think that does make sense. I think the Pacers should be willing to do that if it comes to that, just because, again, if he leaves, they're so far over the cap that they can't replace him. They can't even get a $15 million center. So, they'd be looking at like a Jonas Valanciunas level player, right? Like that's a drop from Myles Turner, especially when it comes to the postseason. So they can't really afford to lose him, but they're in a tricky spot there. I would do it as the Pacers and figure out something else with the rest of my team. But I understand that it's going to be a year of these kind of discussions because of Turner's contract. I'm sure there's more questions of that vein in the coming segments. Certainly, let's keep it rolling with some questions to close out today's show. Let's quickly, though, talk about Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices in the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch because with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Man, oh man, is it the best. I've used the Game Time app before. I went to see the New York Liberty host the Dallas Wings 2023 summer, so over a year ago, and it was awesome. The views from your seat feature was awesome. Spot on view from our little corner down in the lower bowl. The all-in pricing, I loved. I toggled that feature on, so there's no surprise fees at the end, and it was exactly right. I love that they have the Game Time guarantee. They'll credit you 110% of the price difference if you find cheaper tickets elsewhere. Everything you'd want in a ticketing app to guarantee and feel good about the fact that you're paying the lowest price and know what that price is going to be and see what's going to happen when you get to the game. It's all there. You're not guessing about anything, and that's why Game Time is so great. You take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account on Game Time, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Not a ton of major movement in the league recently or any major signings or anything. So Olympic coverage, and I think the most interesting Olympics player to me has been RJ Barrett. He's been awesome for Canada. So check out Locked On Raptors with Sean Woodley for more on that Canadian team, and RJ Barrett, a Canadian playing for the Canadian NBA team. Let's finish up here with two more questions from the interwebs. I think both of these are going to be from Zach Barnett, who had two in a row, which is great. They got screenshotted in a row. I didn't do the ats. Christopher Waltzmeyer is at Chris Walty 30. This is mostly so you guys can follow other Pacers people on Twitter. Eaton was at E10. I'm saying it so you spell it correctly. 387 E10 ETAN 387. And then Zachary Barnett, my man. Hope you're doing well. Haven't seen you in a while. At ZLF Barnett with two T's. His first question is: rate the potential of these players in order. Isaiah Jackson, Andrew Nembhard, Ben Mathurin, Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin. He said, I still think Ajax could be as high as 2. Whew, that's spicy. I do remember somebody I said in the middle of the 2022-23 season, I can't remember what game it was. It was a Pacers home game. I said, I think Isaiah Jackson might have a better career than Chris Duarte. They were like, no way, because Chris Duarte had an awesome rookie season. And that turned out to be lucky correct for me. But I was pretty high on Ajax now, but I don't even think I'd put him 2 on this list. In fact, I might put him 5. I might put him last. My top answer is Andrew Nembhard. I was very bullish on him last year. I still am. Last year, I predicted before the season he'd be the X factor. That was not the case in the regular season. So I got that wrong, even though he did have some key games, obviously. But that was obviously the case in the postseason, where he was very good and was sensational in those 2 games. Calling him an X factor for 2 phenomenal losing performances seems silly, but I mean, everybody knows what that could augur, what he was, and the fact that he got the extension he did says a lot about what the Pacers feel about him. He would be number 1 for me. Number 2, I mean, Mathurin, Nesmith, Toppin is an interesting trio because if you're just going off potential, it's interesting because floor and ceiling potential are different things. Because ceiling-wise, Mathurin might be 1. If you go ceiling, you can score at his level and defend the ball, and like you just watch him and he moves like a stud. Like he's just a great player, right? So I think a potential you might have to put him 2. At the same time, what is his, again, same thing we just talked about to the question last segment, right? It's a fit thing with Siakam and Haliburton and how much he has the ball. So what does that potential amount to on the Pacers, right? His potential versus what he could grow into to make the Pacers as good as possible are probably 2 different things. Although if they are blended, the Pacers would be a sensational basketball team. I think he probably has the second highest potential of this group. I'd put Nesmith 3, Toppin 4, and Isaiah Jackson 5. Although if Isaiah Jackson has a jump shot, he moves up at least to 4, probably maybe even 3, right? If Aaron Nesmith develops a handle or a pick and roll game, he moves up a spot. If Mathurin can shoot really well, he moves probably to the top. Like there's just like one key skill that can move these guys around. Toppin, clearly got better last year, so this sounds stupid to say, but I think we know the most about what he is compared to these guys. He is the oldest of them by 3-ish years. So the potential thing is interesting because he might already be at his peak, but what is this is better than Isaiah Jackson is right now. Will Isaiah Jackson ever be an Obi Toppin level player? Maybe. We'll see. So that would be my answer to that one, but that's hard. There's an argument you can make about, like, if you're just going straight up highest ceiling, Mathurin might be first, right? Actually, he probably would be in that case. But I am a median outcome guy, especially if you listen to me talk about the draft. And I think median outcome wise, my answer would be Nembhard, Mathurin, Nesmith. Sorry. Yes, that was right. Nembhard, Mathurin, Nesmith, Toppin, Jackson. Although I'd have to think really hard about those middle 3 guys. And the other question from Zach is also about Andrew Nembhard. What was your moment for Andrew Nembhard when you realized he had it? The road trip where he cooked the Western Conference in 2022-23 was that for me. Yeah, that was sensational. I mean, that was a stretch for everybody because he had a signature shot and then immediately followed it up with a signature game, right? So that's a coming out party for everyone else. And it was on the West Coast. So it's like fans that aren't typically watching the Pacers. I have a couple answers here, right? So that obviously having 31-13 against the Warriors was amazing. And there was a game in between there where he was really good in Portland too. Doesn't matter. So he, in the very first summer league he played, not last year when he was awesome and Tyrese was saying, oh, get this guy if he shouldn't be playing. He kept getting in the paint, and then he'd have these, like, he'd be surrounded by 3 tall guys and just somehow find a way to get the pass out of the lane, like right to a good finish. I was like, man, this guy can really pass in tight spaces. Like, that's a really valuable skill, especially if you can actually get into the paint and use it. So I was like, that's interesting. And then the way he kind of parlayed that kind of player where he could get in the lane and create shots and be feisty with this, like, oh, this guy can really guard, right? I kind of thought the defense was when I thought, oh, this guy might be something. And when it all kind of clicked for me that this could be a player, I hate to say this, was his first NBA game. This isn't when I thought he had it, to answer the question, but like, remember he got a DNP opening night and then they played the Spurs 2 days later. He played 30 minutes, right? Like, it took that much time for the pitcher to be like, oh, this guy's good, right? And he had 14 points, played great defense, and like that already was a sign of things to come. So I have a lot of little moments where I realized he was really good. And then the other stretch that I don't know if people remember this as well, because it wasn't as heralded for many reasons. They played in Detroit twice in a row during his rookie season. This is about when they were about to fold. They were about to be done being good. And this is right about when Haliburton was done playing too. So they played the Pistons twice. I don't think Haliburton played in one of those games. And Nembhard was just having the ball all the time. He took 15 shots one night. He had 3 games out of 4. They played Milwaukee, Philly, Charlotte, and Toronto. So 2 good teams in one, or 2 great teams in one good team. He had 24 against Milwaukee, 22 against Philly, and 25 against Toronto. That was the stretch where I wrote about his development as a point guard. I was like, oh man, yeah. Like, this guy can score and pass and be a pest on defense and run the show in a meaningful way, right? And they beat Toronto late that season. He had 25 and 10 that night. Like, obviously beating the champs and having 31 and 13 is better than that. Both stats are better, but like pretty close to an equal game. The difference being that the Pacers were out of it at that point. They only won 2 more games the rest of the season at that point, but they won that Milwaukee game with him running the show there. But they won 3 out of 4 in that stretch with Nembhard running the show. That's when I was kind of like, okay, this guy's something. This is a player. Was that late season stretch. And that's why those stretches matter. Those March stretches when you turn to young guys more. Nembhard was great. And it turned into being, a pretty good launching point for his career, for his skill set as a point guard. That's when it was for me. But you're absolutely right that West Coast trip, when he had the best game of his career to date and the signature shot of his career to date at the time, I think he's surpassed both of those things. Now, that was oh, wow, this guy's good, or like can do this kind of stuff thing. And the way he carries himself, he's just never afraid of big moments. After the first game of the playoffs, he was rock solid all the time. He's a good player. He's going to be really good next year. I can't wait to answer the rest of these, and we will do so tomorrow. I think I have 6 more to answer for tomorrow's show. So thank you guys for submitting questions. Much appreciated. Tomorrow will be mailbag part 2 with no leading segment about a signing unless the Pacers sign a player. And then later this week, we'll have some shows with other guests. We'll look at all sorts of stuff from fantasy basketball to potential rotation planning. We'll talk more about the Olympics on Wednesday, because then we'll know if Nembhard and Haliburton are playing for medals. There's so much more to get to, and I hope you guys are enjoying the show and had a great weekend. If you need anything from me, comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or tweet at me at Tony R. East. And the show is on Twitter at Locked On Pacers if you want to see the topics before you listen to know if it's interesting to you, although I hope that they are all interesting to you top to bottom. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. We will see you tomorrow with more Pacers.